Hello and welcome back to my channel and my fighting fantasy gamebook retrospective. Well, we've reached book 8, Scorpion Swamp. And for the first time we have the distinctive green cover. It's the first book where that happens. There's also another first with this book, but I didn't realise it when I first read it back in the 80s. I saw on the bottom Steve Jackson, and I thought, oh great, I love Steve Jackson, Citadel of Chaos, Starship Traveller, but I hadn't seen the small print. Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone present. You see, my friends, you may not know this. There are two Steve Jacksons. This is not Sorcery House of Hell Steve Jackson. It's another Steve Jackson. So that in fact, this is the first time in the range when it's not written by Steve Jackson or Ian Livingstone. And, I always used to think the first one was Talisman of Death, remember? But no, it was this one. And actually, it's a very, very good debut, I think. It's also, Steve Jackson, the other Steve Jackson, doesn't get credit for introducing quite a lot of things in this book. The first is mapping. Now, one of the things that's very distinctive about this book is it helps you map, right? So you go into a space and it says, you are in clearing 13. If you've been here before, go away. If you haven't, keep reading. It's that one. And nothing like that has ever been done before or since. So it helps you construct a map in a way that never happened before. Now, for dumb people like me, who was never very good at making these maps, I quite like that. And what's interesting is it gives a different flavour completely to the book. Right from the beginning, when you go into this swamp, you feel like you're in a maze. And you're like on a grid almost. And it gives the book very much the feeling not of being in a novel like in the other books so far, but more of being in an actual game, in a kind of dungeon master's dungeon, right? And actually, strangely enough, you get lost really quickly. In the other books, the safe path, the route, is pretty much conditioned for you. You can't stray from it too much. But in this book, you get a sense of freedom, that you can almost walk anywhere at any time. And I really, really like that. I think some people might find that it makes it a bit more programmatic, It takes away the atmosphere a bit. But I really enjoy this sense of being lost in this kind of maze swamp. And you can go here and go there and you can retrace your steps. Because one of the things I like about it is, in the other books, you have to go on a linear path. So it's like a linear plot. In this one, you can retrace your steps. And once you've done your quest, you have to come back out again. I really like that element of it. The other thing that the other Steve Jackson introduces is he introduces multiple quests, right? So at the start of the book, it's very funny actually. You turn up at this town outside Scorpion Swamp. And he says, this bloke at the pub says, well, you ought to really have a patron, someone who wants you to do something for them. And you can decide, no, actually, I don't want to, I just want to walk off in Scorpion Swamp. And you do, and you just fall into some bog, and then you decide to come back home. But I like the fact that the book gives you the option. But then you choose between 3 patrons. These are 3 wizards who are living in the town. And one of them is a good wizard called Celator. And he wants you to go and find some bush and pick some magic berries off this bush. There's a neutral wizard called Poomchucker, who turns out not to be a wizard. And he just wants you to find a path through to this village so he can send his supplies through. And then there's an evil wizard called Grimslade, right, who lives in this horrible sort of Castle Dracula on the side of town. And he wants you to go into the swamp and kill this group of wizards that have made their home in the swamp called the Masters. I absolutely love the Masters, right? They're these people, right, you find them, they've got each in their own clearing, and they're like masters of wolves, masters of birds, masters of frogs, masters of spiders. They're these kind of people that have some kind of mastery over some particular element or some animal. And they all have an amulet around their neck. So right at the beginning, you meet the Master of Wolves, who in the artwork just looks like he looks like he's just fallen out of the Bee Gees. This guy comes out of his wooden hut and goes, hello. And you have a chat to him and he says, well, in the future, if you ever need to stop some wolves biting you, just say this word, the word which you never hear, by the way. You never know what the word is. And then he just walks back in his hut. And that's the Master of Wolves. It's a bit underwhelming. But I love them. I wonder what they're doing. Each day they're in their clearing. What's the Master of Frogs doing? what's happening in his froggy world? Does he ever leave that clearing? Does he have super froggy powers? What's the point of being Master of Frogs? I want to know. Anyway, if you work for Grimslade, you have to kill these masters and get the amulets around the neck. You have to get 3 of them, which means that if you do take the evil quest, and of course the first time I read the book, obviously I took the evil quest because I was intrigued, it means that usually these masters, you can get advice from them, or they can help you through the swamp if you're doing the good or neutral quest. But if you're working for Grimslade, you actually have to attack them all the time, and they're really difficult to kill. And you realise that if you try and attack a good one, you're done for. You just can't do it. It's impossible. So what I love about this, because it completely changes the gameplay. If you decide to work on behalf of the good wizard Celator, the way through the safe path through the game and the way you do the game is different if you're working for Poonchucker or if you're working for Grimslade. And it really opens up the gameplay. Again, giving this sense, much more with Scorpion Swamp than with any of the previous books, that you're playing a game rather than reading a novel. And I really, really like that. So other Steve Jackson deserves an enormous amount of credit. He also, for the first time since Citadel of Chaos, he reintroduces magic. I love magic. I love having spells. It makes the gameplay so much more interesting than just if you're using your sword. And I think there's 12 different spells that you can use in this one. And sometimes you can only use them if they're good spells with the good wizard, and sometimes you can only use bad spells if you're working for the bad wizard. And you have to work out the exact right time to use certain spells. I think it really adds to the gameplay, that. So it's a very, very enjoyable, very good game to play. Let's have a quick talk about the artwork. Now, the artwork is done by Duncan Smith. And the thing is about the artwork, it's rather sweet. I rather like it. But you see, the thing is, all the way through the introduction to the book, it's telling you, Scorpion Swamp. This is a place where travellers dare not go, where every traveller has got lost. Even the bravest adventurer is terrified of Scorpion Swamp. And then you get this rather nice, light, sort of quite sweet artwork. It looks like, it's not Scorpion Swamp, it's like a sort of wetland centre, or a nice forest with a visitor centre down the road. It's all very light and breezy. It's kind of out of kilter, I think, with the atmosphere that Steve Jackson was trying to create. It's very lovely in its own right and quite atmospheric, but I just think it's the wrong tone. I think someone should have told Duncan Smith, sorry mate, we wanted something a bit darker, a bit more gothic. I don't feel really bad walking around this swamp. In fact, I feel like I'm having a nice day out in the country. Just before I leave Scorpion Swamp, I quite like the setup of this adventure. I like the way Steve Jackson solves certain issues right at the beginning. So in the introduction, you help this woman on the side of the road, and she gives you a brass ring. And this brass ring is like a compass. It always tells you which way is north. So it stops you from getting lost, right? But it also gives you, it explains the way the mapping system in the book works, because you always know which way is north. I quite like that little detail. I also quite like the detail that this brass ring grows warm every time you're near someone evil. So if it's still cold on your finger, you know that the people are good. It's quite interesting. It's sort of giving you a little hint as to whether to attack someone or not. It's very sweet. It all gives the sense that this adventure is perhaps, with the nice light artwork, is more directed towards a younger age group. But actually I found it very, very playable and enjoyable, and it's still one of my personal favourites of the first 10 books. I'm not sure how popular it is with the wider FF fraternity, but I really like it. So thumbs up to other Steve Jackson.